So notice this problem is much longer than the first two. And I'm just going to show you that you can use the same steps for the itty bitty problems and even these long problems. You just have to take it slow. So the first step is I always find the equal sign and draw a line so I have a left and a right hand side. So when we do our simplifying, our first step, look over here and see if you have any parentheses. You want to get rid of those parentheses by doing distributing. Do not collect any like terms. So even if this said plus 3, I do not want you to do 10 plus 3 right this second. You always want to get rid of parentheses. So notice, usually the last two problems there was a number in front of the parentheses. But notice there's not a number in front of the parentheses. So some of you might be saying, yeah, there's a number in front, there's a 10. No, what's directly in front of the parentheses? A subtraction sign, not a number. You need to have a number in front of there. So if you don't see a number, just like when you don't see a number in front of some of the variables, you're going to slip in a 1. So see how there's no number here, right next to the parentheses, kind of like here. Then you have to slip in a 1. Because you're distributing not 10, not 9, but distributing a -1. Now some of you say, wait, why did he say 9? I don't want you to say, well, I know 10 minus 1 is 9. Remember, collecting you do not do until this parentheses are gone. So do not say 10 minus 1 is 9. Just distribute the number in front and its sign. So we're going to distribute by multiplying. So the 10, still on the outside edge. -1 times x, -1x. -1 times positive 5, you know negative times positive. We always said that when you distribute or multiply, you do the tic-tac-toe board. Negative times positive is -5. Now since this is outside the parentheses, bring it down. Now that we got rid of all the parentheses on just the left-hand side, remember I'm not paying attention to the right-hand side, notice I have some like terms. Constant, coefficient, variable, constant, coefficient, variable. So it looks like these two go together, and see how I circle them? The number and its sign. And these two go together. Remember? The item and its sign. So if we're going to do the variables first, we have a -1x and a positive 3x. You know, when you have a negative and a positive, different signs subtract. We get 2x. Who wins the tug of war? 3 players or 1 player? Team 3 wins, so that means it gets to be positive, the answer. Now what about the constants? This is a positive, this is a negative. So again, different labels here, so subtract, we get a 5. And then we need to see who wins. 5 players or 10 players? 10 has more players, so it's going to be team positive. So make sure you make this a positive 5. Now this one you have to put the plus sign here because I want to separate this 5, which is a constant, from this variable or coefficient. If you don't put it there, it might look like it's multiplication, x5. So some people might get confused and think that is a coefficient. So if it's positive, make sure you put the plus sign so that the constant can separate from the variable. Now that we're done on just the left side, let's focus on the right-hand side. We're going to do the same steps. Do you have any parentheses? Yes. Get rid of the parentheses first. So let's distribute not only the number that's directly in front of the parentheses, but its sign. Since this 6x is on the outside, bring it down. -5 times x is -5x. Negative times negative is going to be a positive 5. And then -3 is on the outside of the parentheses. Don't distribute, just bring down. Once you have this, then you can start collecting any like terms. Remember, we're ignoring this side. Just focus on the right-hand side. Coefficient, variable, constant, constant. So you can see that these two are going to collect, and these two are going to collect. So this is a positive, this is a negative. When you have a positive and negative, subtract. We're going to get 1x. 6 from 5 is 1. Keep the same label, x. Who wins? Team positive. 6 players versus 5. 6 has more players, so positive 1x. Here you have a positive 5 and a negative 3. Different signs again. Subtract. Notice we get a positive 2 because 5 players versus 3. 5 has more players. You must write the positive sign when you're separating from the variable. So now that we're done with the simplifying, the labeling, and this one's another trick guide. Notice that you have x's on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side. Always do the variable side by looking to see who has the higher coefficient. So the coefficient here is 1, the coefficient here is 2, this is higher. When I'm talking about higher, I'm looking at the numbers. So if this was a negative 2 and this was a positive 1, this side technically would win. Okay, so I just want you to be aware, I'm including the signs as well. So whatever side is bigger, label that side as variable. So when you compare a positive 1 with a positive 2, this is bigger. This would be the constant. Now when you start moving, you can see coefficient can stay because we don't have a coefficient sign. Variable stays because you have a variable. 5 doesn't stay because it's not a variable, it's a constant. So the opposite of a positive 5 would be a negative 5. Whatever you do to the left, you have to do to the right. These cancel out because they're additive inverses. Notice the 2 and the 5 are like terms, they're both constants. This variable and coefficient you can bring down. Since this was a positive and this was a negative, you know you're going to subtract because they're different labels. And who wins the tug of war to put a sign here? 2 players versus 5 players. 5 has more players, so that's team negative. Now we're not done moving yet. Notice this x cannot stay on the constant side, so we have to move this. Remember, we have to move everything to the appropriate side before we do any divorcing or separating. So this coefficient needs to move with the x. They're a married couple. When you move, you have to move the whole group, the whole married couple. So the opposite of a positive would be a negative 1x. Of course, whatever you do on one side, you have to do to the other. These are additive inverses, so they cancel out. So you get a negative 3. And in here, positive, negative, so we subtract. So we're going to get 1x. Remember, 2 take away 1 is 1. Who wins the tug of war? 2 players versus 1. 2 players, so that means positive wins. And then here, we don't need to do divorcing. Why? Because 1 times x is the same thing as x. But if you forgot, you could just say, well, the coefficient is 1, divide both sides by 1, you'll still get x equals negative 3. Right? So even though this is a longer problem, we were still able to do the 4 steps.